Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show. Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast. My name's David Lawrence, and I'm absolutely delighted today to be at the headquarters of Openreach. I'm here with Mark Lam, who's the CIO. Mark, thank you so much for joining me.
Not at all, it's a pleasure.
Mark, you've got a fantastic story to tell. I'm sure all our listeners would love to hear a bit about your background. I've known you for a number of years. Mark, why don't you just give us a quick introduction, give us a bit of background about yourself and what you've been doing.
Yes, of course. I'm from Singapore originally. Moved to the UK 20 years ago for university, and I've always had a deep passion for technology. I began my career here in the UK during the dot-com boom, if we remember that, in the late 90s.
Of course. And
I worked for a variety of startups, so I experienced the heady days of the dot-com boom. I remember working for a company once where we had an in-house masseuse who used to come every Wednesday with the most lovely officers, and you felt you couldn't, you were just set up to win. But I was also there when the bubble burst, if you remember, around about 2000, year 2000, 2001. And I experienced companies I worked for going under. So that taught me my first big lesson, which is not to take any business for granted, big or small. You've got to fight to be competitive. You've got continually to innovate, and you have to manage your risks really well. After that, I worked for a number of larger, more blue chip companies. I was a head of IT for Carphone Warehouse and TalkTalk. I was a sales director in Siemens, and I was for many years a director in BT, mostly working the technology fields. Although I have experienced probably the full range of the business life cycle within that, from marketing through to operations to sales. But my love is technology, and I love operating in that intersection between business and technology. So it's not technology for its own sake, but has a very clear business application. And I was given the opportunity, a great opportunity 2.5 years ago, to be the head of technology for Openreach. I'm the CIO. And therefore responsible for our technology innovation, our network architecture. We run the UK's largest fixed line access network, and our information technology as well that runs the business and operates the network.
Mark, we talked a little bit off the recording about some of the customers that you work with, and we talked about, obviously Sky is a very large customer of yours, TalkTalk, Vodafone, many of the operators in the UK. I was just curious, obviously Openreach has gone through significant change in the last few years, and managing those kind of large scale relationships can be very difficult. What are the challenges that you perhaps have faced within Openreach to build those relationships and maintain those and actually improve those relationships?
We have a huge range of customers. Our customers are called communication providers, and we service 500 of them in the UK. And they range from small regional companies, often very dynamic, entrepreneurial, venture capital led, to very large businesses like you mentioned Sky and TalkTalk and BT and Vodafone are very, very, very large customers of ours. Having a positive, productive relationship is critical to this. Because of the way the telecoms market has evolved and is regulated, we are bound together in a relationship. We supply the network infrastructure, and the communication providers run services on top of that and sell that on to consumers and businesses. So we operate in an ecosystem which is defined by regulation, but which we have to self-run. So that relationship is absolutely critical. When I arrived 2.5 years ago, I think what I'll say is we'll recognize that our relationships with all our communication providers, some of those relationships were not strong. They had gone stale, or else I think in most cases we've lost empathy with what our communication providers need, and most importantly, we lost the ability to empathize what their customers wanted. And their customer expectations were changing. If you hark back to the 90s with dial-up broadband, for instance, and then through to ISDN and then ADSL and broadband, that whole evolution, broadband connection had evolved from something that was an expensive privilege to now a necessity of life. and therefore customer expectations on speed, quality, and the level of customer service that they expect to get, and the experience of the whole product has evolved. And we needed to make sure as an industry we evolve together, but we didn't have those relationships. I'm pleased to say in the last 2 years we have transformed a set of those relationships. Firstly, by committing a set of bold ambitions to improve our service, and there's still a lot more to do, but we have radically improved our service, particularly in the last year. For instance, in the speed at which we provision our customers, or the speed at which we repair a line that is down, and actually mostly keeping to the promises that we actually set. So firstly, it's about understanding what makes your own customer, a communication provider in this space, successful, putting yourself in their shoes. So that's half of it. The other half, I would say, is the investment you need to make personally in building relationships and spending time with people and understanding them as people. And that requires, we're all very busy,
yes,
and meetings can often be extremely transactional, but that just the extra human touch makes a huge difference.
I couldn't agree more. And it's, and I was interested, again, just having a chat with you a little bit earlier about the change that's going on in the organisation. And I know one of the hot topics at the moment is diversity in the workforce. Yep. I know that that there's a planning to hire quite a substantial number, about 1,500 engineers. What are you doing to attract diversity in the workplace? Whether that's attracting more females into the engineering business or into engineering within Openreach, and that diversity. What's Openreach planning to do?
We passionately believe that a diverse workforce operating in an inclusive environment is not only ethically right thing to do, but it's a commercially sensible thing to do. We need, as a workforce, to reflect the composition of our own customers, and we operate in a very diverse world. Without that diversity within our own organization, we can never empathize with what our customers want. And also a diverse workforce, any manager will tell you, if you have a team sat around the table with you, and they're all copies of yourself, you are immediately limiting your creativity and your constraining points of view. Having different people around the table from different walks of life who have very different life experiences immediately brings different perspectives that are enormously powerful. I'm delighted to say this year we are hiring 1,500 more field engineers all up and down the country, which is a fantastic opportunity for people to get to be well invested in, to be trained, and to have a great career with us in Openreach. Firstly, it's about reinforcing the view that we have a very inclusive environment and a set of policies to match that. Right? And so we're very proud of our record when tested by external bodies on our inclusive environment. We are award winners, for instance, in terms of our inclusive environment. What is important is that we role model this from the top. So if you look at our most senior management team, the gender balance there, for instance, has changed quite a lot in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
We have a lot more women sitting at the executive table, reporting to the chief executive officer in huge roles. And it needs to start there, and sending out the signal, therefore, that this isn't just talk, but that we mean business.
And that's really fantastic to hear. And there's other organisations that are embracing that. I think what's traditionally, been a male-dominated role as an engineer, it'll be interesting to see how that develops, and it'd be fantastic to attract more females and diversity into that role.
Much longer term, we're also investing heavily in our sustainability and our charity work. As a large business like ours, we do have an obligation to give something back to the communities. So one of the programs which we sponsor and that we support with our own volunteering effort is technology education in schools. So we work at both the primary school and the secondary school level to educate them, and we run programs specifically, for instance, for girls in school to pique interest in technology. So we're thinking super long term as well,
yes.
Because if you don't stimulate the interest at the right level through the educational system, and we're partnering with government on this, you won't create enough when people enter the workplace, people with the right background, and people with the right thirst and passion for this.
Mark, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball for you, but if you were giving your 18-year-old self some advice from your wealth of experience over the years, you were just either, maybe you were leaving school at 16 or you were going on to further education. In today's market, where we are in today's world, what advice would you give yourself about career and what to do in the workplace?
I think the best advice I could give young people today who are entering the job market is to be very, very clear about what profession and what path you want to follow. It is as the UK and indeed the European markets are evolving, there are a lot of jobs that become kind of service jobs, I would call them, or support functions. And it's quite easy to sort of land in a desk job that can be quite generic. And if you find yourself doing so, it may put food on the table for some years, David, but over time you do need to choose a path and advance in that path. If there's one regret I would make, is I think I spent too many years in the early part of my career not having made that decision myself. So whilst I stuck to one or two sectors, I moved around with different job functions a little bit too much. So when I got my first serious managerial role, I actually felt I lacked the depth in a particular area to be able to manage it competently. So it was an extremely steep learning curve, and it takes quite a lot of emotional strength to ensure you can maintain your confidence in that. And I think there is a danger these days with young people as well on not having selected their career path. And I mentor a lot of people, a lot of young people, and I've just felt it over the years. People are becoming less clear what they want and what the professions are.
And what we're 2017 now, and in 3 years' time it's going to be 2020. What do you think the Openreach organisation is going to look like then, and what would you look back to and say that's a great result? What would it look like to you?
I'll tell you what I would like the Openreach organisation to look like in 5 years' time, and I think it's what our customers would want us to look like. Firstly, we need to continue our journey to improve service. It's still not good enough. We've got a lot better in the last year, but we need to start to match customer expectations on what they now see as a fact of life and necessity of life, their broadband connectivity. Their lives are operated by that. We need to recognize that and provide a service experience that actually matches that. That's no tall order, but it's something that we're confident, particularly with the improvements we've made in the last year, we know we can do it. Second, we need to accelerate and continue to invest heavily in a fibre network for the country. We've done a lot in the last 10 years, and we had one of the fastest fibre rollout programs in the world, and with over 90% of the country now being enabled on a fibre product with super fast broadband speeds. But as you know, broadband bandwidth consumption just keeps going up.
Of course.
As applications change and people's habits change and demands on bandwidth. So we need to ensure we can keep up with that, and that requires a lot of investment, and in our case, a tremendous amount of civil engineering, because we have to build physical networks across the country. So we need to continue to invest heavily in that. In 5 years' time, I would like to see a lot more fibre and full fibre right to people's doors provision in the country, and this will last for generations, a full fibre network. And the last I would like to see in 5 years' time is for Openreach to be able to demonstrate its independence. And partnership deals, for example, with across industry would be enormously attractive to us.
Mark, and you touched on a few points there, and I'd just like to mention on that. So, obviously, the next few years, obviously, we've got a large increase in VR, AI, devices being used across things. There's going to be that, as you said, that before we've got 5G, IoT really coming to light, and that's going to just increase, as you said, that pressure on on that service.
Yep.
What if you could just give a description perhaps of something that perhaps was your biggest failing? It's a difficult question to ask and answer sometimes, but something that was your biggest mistake or failure, and what you learnt from that. And again, if there was some advice that you would give to perhaps some of the younger listeners listening.
If I would have my time again, I think throughout my career, and this isn't specifically an Openreach comment at all, far from it. I think having the conviction as a technologist in knowing what is right, long term, keeping very firm to that strategy, and having the courage to make that happen in spite of all the odds, would be something, if I were to repeat my career again, would focus more on. It is, particularly if you work in large corporations, as I have done throughout my career, there is a natural dynamic to a large corporation. It has a lot of precedence, has a lot of history, has a lot of inheritance. Some people call it legacy. And that tends to structure your actions and your decisions in a particular way. So you tend to move in a particular direction as a huge organism. It takes an enormous amount of conviction and courage to say, hold on a minute, as the technologist, I envisage something very, very different here. We must change course. And that's a huge debate to have in a large corporation, very different from a smaller startup environment. I wish I'd taken the learnings I had early in my career, working in smaller, more entrepreneurial startup companies, and effected that in a large corporate environment, rather than to be carried along with it.
Yes.
Large corporations can become quite settled in their way. The poorest examples become very stale and complacent. The good examples become very structured and organized and predictable. But in a very competitive global market now, I don't think large companies, Fortune 500 companies in the States or in Europe, can continue to act like that. And I think we need, as leaders in these Fortune 500 companies, to create the conditions for more entrepreneurial spirit to come through.
Mark, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'm delighted to have you on and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you.